All right, welcome back to DSR. This is week 8, day 1. We finished week 7 strong. My goal was 200 subscribers, and y'all blew that away. All right, so I'm gonna commit to a video every day, every time we destroy one of these goals or meet one of these goals. So my goal for week 8, 500, and we're already starting off strong because we ended week 7 at 325 and already going great on the first day. So if we can hit 500 this week, I'll keep doing a video every day next week as well. But I'm going to fulfill my commitment video every day this week. And I want to talk about this. We're talking about the Unearthed Arcana from August. This is the Apocalyptic subclasses, and one of my favorites here is the Gladiator. I love Dark Sun, which is why I'm going back to cover this, and it is my favorite campaign setting. And I am so giddy that they are bringing it back. I'm just excited. Okay, so the Gladiator. These are the notes from the designers on what they were trying to do with the subclass. So it says, when designing the Gladiator subclass for the fighter, we took a lot of inspiration from video games, especially classic fighting games. The thrill of a finishing move or a perfectly timed counter is so iconic, and we wanted the subclass to deliver on that fantasy. The Gladiator is meant to be a performer as well as a martial combatant. As such, we leaned heavily into charisma as a secondary ability for the subclass. The subclass also needs to be brutal, yet still tactically compelling. So its core feature, Brutality, hinges on using additional weapon mastery properties as a vehicle for different cool effects when you hit with an attack roll. Weapon mastery properties have been such a fun addition to the game, and it's always a joy to get to play with them more in design. The intro for the subclass in the UA document is Gladiator, a fighter subclass, Master Brutality and Bloodsport. Gladiators are just as much performers as they are warriors. Whether brawling in underground fighting rings or fighting for survival in bloodstained arenas, a gladiator combines martial skill with theatrics to awe and intimidate their audiences. And they start off strong. A level 3 ability called Brutality. Shaped by the intensity of the arena, you've learned to execute brutal martial moves. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack roll using a melee weapon, you can add one of the following brutality effects of your choice. You can do this a number of times equal to your charisma modifier, minimum of once, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a short or long rest. First up, your first option is Bleed. You can activate the Sap Mastery property in addition to a different mastery property that you're using with that weapon, and the target takes extra damage equal to your charisma modifier, minimum of 1. The extra damage type is the same as the weapons type. Second option, Bluff. You can activate the Vex Mastery property in addition to a different mastery property you're using with that weapon, and you have advantage on the next saving throw you make before the end of your next turn. And the third option is Stumble. You can activate the Topple Mastery property in addition to a different mastery property you're using with that weapon, and on its next turn, the target can take only an action or a bonus action, not both. So this is very cool to start with. First up, it's noteworthy that it's melee weapons, not melee attacks. So you can still activate this with thrown melee weapons. So you can do this at range, as well as fighting in melee. And what it's doing is it's giving you a secondary weapon mastery that you trigger in addition to the weapon mastery that's already on the weapon. So if you hit with like a long sword that has sap, you can activate Bluff and also get the Vex Mastery in addition to Sap at the same time on that attack. So that's pretty cool. And I do like these features. I like that they have an additional little boost on top of that. So the bleed causes a little extra damage, which makes sense. I also like that it's not like delayed to the start of the creature's next turn or the end of the creature's next turn or something like that, which would be logical. But effects like that are so hard to remember in game. We have so many things going on. Those kind of things are often forgotten. So I'm glad they just take care of it right then. You just bleed right then, and that's the extra damage. Great. Bluff, I think they need to make a change here. It's kind of problematic to combine an offensive feature that also gives you a defensive feature, because you're going to use Vex. You're going to trigger Bluff mainly because you want to get Vex on the target. And so you're going to end up using it a lot for just that, and instead of using it for saving throws when you need it. I think they need to pull that piece off, swap it with some other benefit for Bluff, and give you, the advantage benefit some other way, perhaps at a different level. I don't know. Yeah, or if you want it for the advantage benefit, then you're going to just, then you're going to trigger it just to get advantage and hope that you have to make that saving throw, which is always a tricky thing. Is this monster going to cause a saving throw next round? You never know. So you're going to trigger it, hope that you make the saving throw, and then that helps, and then you're kind of just throwing away the Vex half of it, right? You're not triggering it for Vex. So you may not be benefiting from the Vex at all. And my only real, and that's not terrible. It's okay. The big problem with this is the number of uses you have. Your charisma modifier, which is, in my opinion, just not enough. And I know that in the latest UA for the arcane subclasses, they do the same thing with the arcane archer, right? It's intelligence modifier, number of uses. I think that that's too little. These effects are pretty minor. None of them last, if they last at all, none of them last more than a round. And so you're going to start off probably, right? You want your primary attack stat, dexterity or strength, to be like a 17 when you start. You're going to round it up to 18 at level 4. That leaves you enough points to have like a 16 in Constitution and a 14 in Charisma, or a 14 in Constitution and a 16 in Charisma. So at most you're having 3 uses of this, and that's if you sacrifice some Constitution to do that. And that's something that the Battle Master doesn't have to do, right? I think this is comparable to the Battle Master in a lot of ways. So the Battle Master has all of these uses of these features they get, different options, their battle maneuvers, and they get 4 per short rest. You're going to start off with 2, maybe 3 per short rest, and the only way you get 3 for the Gladiator is if you sacrifice Constitution to pump up your Charisma. The Battle Master doesn't have to do that. So the Battle Master is going to get 4 of their superiority dice, and they could just put everything, get a 17 in their primary attack stat, round it up to 18 at level 4, still have a 16 in Constitution, so they're going to have more hit points, and they still have more flexibility than what you can achieve with a Gladiator. And I don't think these effects are more powerful than the Battle Master's battle maneuvers. I know I've seen a lot of people say that they think they're more powerful. I don't think they are. Primarily because, yes, weapon masteries are great, but the majority of the time, you're going to choose weapons that already have the mastery, the most important mastery for your build that you want. So these are going to be on top of that. These are not, and so you're choosing a secondary weapon mastery, and that you could have already gotten. Like if you really, really needed that weapon mastery, you would have chosen that weapon. And now you're adding a secondary mastery on top of that. That's not the most important one for your build. It's now just a little extra something, which devalues it, in my opinion. So I think that these maneuvers or these options are weaker than the Battle Master, and I definitely think you should have more uses. In fact, but I also think the Battle Master should have more uses of their superiority dice. You've honed your combat skills to entertain, devastating opponents, and dazzling onlookers. You gain the following benefits: athletic flair. Whenever you make a dexterity acrobatics or strength athletics check, you gain a bonus to the check equal to your charisma modifier, minimum of 1. Cool. Bonus proficiency. You gain proficiency in one of these skills of your choice: acrobatics, athletics, deception, intimidation, or performance. In my games, I DM primarily. I DM a lot more than I get to be a player. In my games, ability checks are way more. I call for way more ability checks than I think any other DM I've ever seen. And I'm not like, that's not a lot either, right? I'm like 5 to 10 ability checks per hour, which isn't a lot, but still way more than other DMs I've seen, and certainly way more than any DM where I've been a player. Like they usually, if you call for perception, in once an hour, that's a lot with other DMs I've been with. So I call for a lot of ability checks, and so skill proficiencies and bonuses to ability checks is actually quite beneficial in my mind, and for people who play in my games. And so I think this is very cool, very thematic, and I think it's decent. I think it's better than a ribbon, and this is really adds to your usefulness and versatility out of combat. And that's something I always like to see in every class and subclass is, yeah, sure, great, you've got some combat abilities. Let's see some things for non-combat abilities so that you have something to do when combat isn't going on, right? Combat is great and fun, but it shouldn't always be combat all the time, right? So when you're not having combat, what are you doing? So these are great. These are going to add to help you with exploration encounters and social encounters, and I think they're very thematic. So 2 thumbs up on this ability. Level 7, Flourish Parry. You've learned to stylishly counter blows from your opponents. When an enemy hits you with a melee attack roll, you can take a reaction to add your charisma modifier, minimum of 1, to your AC against the attack, potentially causing the attack to miss. Flourish counter. Sorry. If this reaction causes the attack to miss, you can retaliate with a powerful counterattack as part of the same reaction. Make an attack roll with a melee weapon against the triggering creature. If this attack roll hits, you can use one of your brutality effects on the target without expending a use of that feature. Once this counterattack hits, you can't use this feature to make another counterattack until you finish a long rest. You can also restore your use of this counterattack by expending a use of second wind, no action required. All right, so first up, let's talk about the reaction boost to your AC. So this is like Defensive Duelist, but a lot less powerful. So Defensive Duelist, so you're going to level 7. You probably still have a 14 charisma, maybe the 16, so you might have 2 or 3. Defensive Duelist is giving you a +3 to your AC, so it's at least as good as what you're probably the maximum you're going to have as a Gladiator of +3 to your AC. But Defensive Duelist lasts until the start of your next turn. Flourish Parry only benefits you against the one triggering attack and nothing else. So it's really tough to want to spend your reaction on this. And then let's look at the Battle Master's defensive feature of their superiority die, their battle maneuver, which is evasive footwork. As a bonus action, you can expend 1 superiority die and take the disengage action. You can also roll and add the number rolled to your AC until the start of your next turn. So this is a bonus action instead of a reaction, which is probably better. Yeah, probably better because the Battle Master can get this and Defensive Duelist and stack them, and both of which would last till the start of your next turn. Or they could not get Defensive Duelist and get Sentinel and use their reaction for an additional attack, really increasing their DPR and like controlling monsters, keeping them from getting to the back line. The amount increased as well. So at level 3, the Battle Master has 1d8 superiority die. That scales up. I think at level 10 it goes to a d10. So there's the d8, which is 4.5 on average. Let's call it is the benefit they're going to get. You're going to have a maximum of a +3 to your AC. They're going to have on average a 4.5 bonus to their AC. Again, against every attack until the start of their next turn. Now you might roll less, but you're not going to roll less all the time. Sometimes you'll roll higher. Like you might have a +8 bonus to your AC until the beginning of your next turn, and the poor Gladiator is still getting the +3 to a single attack. So I don't like that I especially don't like this Flourish Parry because you can just get Defensive Duelist, and that's going to be better than this. Like you would never use Flourish Parry while you have Defensive Duelist, right? And so now you've taken a feat that you're still kind of want because it's so much better than this, and it completely overrides the value you would get from this. But even more importantly, it takes your reaction, which you probably want to use on like a Sentinel or an opportunity attack. So this isn't great. I don't like it. I think they need to improve that part of it. So let's move on to the second part, which is the Flourish counter, which I think is cool. I do like it. So I like. So this is one way it's better, right? Reaction to boost your AC and a counter attack. Cool. And you could add a brutality effect to it. Okay, cool. Now it's starting to cook a little, and then it's a huge letdown because once this counterattack hits, you can't use this again. You can't counterattack again until you finish a long rest, which is just weird, right? I guess you can you can restore it by expending use of second wind, not using second wind, but expending it without any other benefit, which is a pretty big expense to make. And this is complex and confusing, right? You have your brutality uses, and then this is a completely different use. Like it has its own resource pool, and it works on a different mechanic than anything else the game has ever seen, which is you can use it as many times as you want, but once it succeeds, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. It doesn't recharge on a short rest, like is the common theme and convention for fighters and fighter subclasses. Is their stuff recharges on a short rest. I don't think this is good. This is pretty weak and unnecessarily complex and underwhelming. I would change this, remove the limit on the number of counterattacks you can make, and I would make it use brutality dice or your brutality uses. There's no dice. It would expend brutality uses, maybe make it cost 2 brutality uses, and I would double the number of brutality uses you get. So double your charisma modifier instead of just equal to your charisma modifier for number of brutality uses. That gives you more uses of your kind of those little effects you get at third level. This would cost 2 of those, and I think maybe I would still have it not expend the uses if you don't hit, and just let you keep trying, and it only expends your brutality uses if you hit. That's what I would do. That way it's one resource pool that you're managing, and you can use it more often. If they print it like this, everyone is gonna resource hoard this. They're gonna wait until the because they once it succeeds, they can't use it again. So they're gonna hold on this and never use it until they get to the BBEG fight or whatever the big fight for the day they think is, which might not come. So there's gonna be a lot of days where they just never, a lot of in-game days where they just never try this because they're not sure. Is this the big fight? Is this where I need to use it? Do I need to wait? And that's not fun, right? Having a whole feature that you just don't use because it's so precious. You want to wait for the right moment, and then then the right moment doesn't come, or you go through several venturing days with never using it because you were waiting for the right moment. That's going to be a big feel bad. Yeah, and this needs a lot of improvement. Cool idea. I like the flavor and thematics. It needs a lot of improvement. Level 10, bolder brutalities. Your brutal martial prowess has improved. The following effects are added to your brutality options. So now we're going to, with the same level 3 feature, we just have 3 more options, right? So this is still going to use our brutality options, right? All right. First, Rive. You can activate the cleave mastery property in addition to a different mastery property you're using with that weapon, and you can add your ability modifier to the damage of the additional attack made as part of that property's activation. Rush. You can activate the push mastery property in addition to a different mastery property you're using that weapon, and you can immediately move up to your speed without provoking opportunity attacks. And then the last one, Stagger. You can activate the slow mastery property in addition to a different mastery property you're using with that weapon, and the target has disadvantage on the next saving throw it makes before the end of your next turn. Okay, these are much better than your level 3 options, although not exclusively, like not mutually exclusive. Like I wouldn't suggest that you just start using these and never use your level 3 options. It's just these are better. So in a lot of ways. So for example, cleave, right? Cleave is a big damage boost. So, but you can only use it once per turn. So once per turn, it's really attractive to activate that. And you can activate that on anything, like even a thrown weapon, which by the way, cool thematics, right? Throw a spear and you activate cleave and you role play it as the spear pierces the first guy and hits the second guy too. Very cool. Pins them to a wall. I mean, if it kills them, that's what I would say. It pins them to a wall. I like awesome role play moments on that. Rush, I like this one because it kind of evokes this idea of you charging at them and knocking them back with your charge, right? Now it's kind of like the mechanics are a little inverted, like you push them first and then you charge after them. But I would describe it as, a bull rush. Like you charge into them, slam them, throw them backwards. Great. I think that one's pretty cool. And another option for moving without provoking an opportunity attack, which the fighter already has one option for doing that, the tactical mastery, tactical whatever. Their level, I think, is level 5, where they get when they use a second wind to heal themselves, they can also move half their movement without provoking opportunity attacks. So now they've got 2 options for that, which is great. It's always nice to have additional options for movement without provoking opportunity attacks. And Stagger, this one's cool. Now, slow isn't one of the more powerful weapon masteries, but causing disadvantage on the target's next saving throw is a big one before the end of your next turn. Like that's a big rider effect on that. So the main reason you want to use that one is because of that secondary effect, not for the slow mastery. And slow mastery is actually really easy to get. Like you can get it on, a bunch of weapons have slow mastery. Yeah, you're going to use this because of that secondary effect, which I love. I love anything that does things like this, which encourage teamwork with other players, right? And you probably don't, as a fighter gladiator, you don't have a lot of effects that are worth causing disadvantage on the saving throw against what you're going to do. But if you can cause disadvantage against the wizard's spell, the cleric's hold person, that is awesome, right? So you're going to set up the cleric for their hold person with this. You're going to set up the wizard with their slow, spell, or their dominate, person, dominate beast, dominate monster spell. Awesome. I love it. Now here's some kind of the, I don't know, downsides, I'd say, or I think some things they need to think through a little better, which is you've now got these 6 options of these 6 different weapon masteries you're adding on top of things. You're also the fighter who already has the most weapon masteries of any class. By this level, I think you have 4 or 5 weapon masteries already. I think 5 at this point. You have 5 weapon masteries, and each weapon mastery that you can access on top of that just has less value, right? Because you always pick the weapon that has the weapon mastery you need most, right? For your build, right? This is the most important thing for my build. I'm going to get a weapon that does that first. Then all of these are kind of like the next beneficial one, the next one down from that. And at level 9, you have this tactical master feature, which lets you swap the mastery that's on the weapon already to push, sap, or slow. So you already have all these options to be using different masteries. Like you're using a maul, right, which has topple. Well, you topple them on the first attack. There's no benefit to trying to topple on the second attack. They're already prone. So you use tactical master to do a sap, slow, or push instead. Now you've got the second mastery that you might want to apply on one round. And then what's a third, then the third one that you're really interested in, right, would be one of these from your brutalities, your brutality options. So I think there is, as you level up as a fighter and as this gladiator subclass, there is this continual diminishing returns effect you get on additional weapon mastery options. Now I know there's those secondary riders, and some of them are worth it on their own, like stumble, but a lot of them are not worth it on their own, right? Like the bleed option, you're going to cause sap, which is an easy mastery to get, which you can also just get with tactical master whenever you want. And it's not one of the more powerful masteries, by the way. And then it just adds your charisma modifier and damage. It's a small amount of damage. And remember, your brutality uses are expensive. Expensive in the sense that you don't get very many. You're getting, 2, hopefully, that you started out with a 14 charisma, topping out at 5. If you max out your charisma at 20, you're going to be the the only fighter in the game who's maxing out their charisma per short rest. 5 per short rest isn't terrible. 2 per short rest is going to feel super bad. And you're going to have all these diminishing returns of these weapon masteries. Like it's just not. It's a cool idea. It just doesn't build enough on itself, and it's really losing steam because because of that. Level 15, Brutal Resurgence. Whenever you use your second wind to regain hit points, you regain an expended use of Brutality. You also regain an expended use of Brutality whenever you use your action surge. This is 12 levels too late. Straight up. Like, they need this at level 3, right? Either double the number of uses you get, so 2 times your charisma modifier, or give them this at level 3. And even then, this is a little complex. I like that it doesn't remove, like, you're not expending your use of second wind or action surge just to recharge this. It's when you use your second wind and action surge for their default thing they're supposed to be used for, you also recharge a use of brutality. So I like that there's that. You're not losing out on something that the fighter has. You're just adding this to that. But it is 2 different ways to recharge your brutality use, and I foresee players struggling with the complexity, right? Struggling to remember that, oh yeah, on that I do that. With action surge, I also recharge it, and they need this at level 3. Yeah, definitely at level 3. Um, and I would maybe level 15 replaces with something that like boosts the flourish counterattack to boost the AC. Maybe at this level you make it last until the start of your next turn, so that it lasts through every attack until the start of your next turn. Yeah, that would be a lot better. That would feel pretty good. Maybe then you would just kind of struggle through having it the flourish counterattack as it is, and suffer without defensive duelist or something like that until you make it to level 15, because you know that there's something coming that's going to make it good enough that you don't need that, assuming you make it to level 15, right? Level 18. When you hit a bloodied creature with an attack roll, you can attempt to critically injure it. The target makes a Constitution saving throw, which is a standard calculation. On a failed save, the target suffers the following effects. It is maimed. If the target takes the attack action, it can make only one attack, and it is sluggish. The target's speed is halved, and it has a -2 penalty to its armor class. These effects last until the target regains hit points. Once a target fails its saving throw against this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. Okay, there's multiple things I don't like about this one. I mean, I like the theme and the idea, but here's the first problem. First up, this is basically, it's similar to the slow spell, but right, instead of 6 targets, it's 1 target. Additionally, it's missing a lot of the slow benefits, right? So slow also, I've highlighted the portions that slow gives you that this doesn't. Slow also causes a -2 penalty to dexterity saving throws, and they also can't take reactions, so it removes reactions. Then it also causes the effect of they either can take an action or a bonus action. This Mutilate doesn't. And it hinders spell casting with somatic components. If they try to cast a spell with a somatic component, there's a 25% chance the spell just fails. So it causes spell failure. So the slow effect is better than Mutilate. I'd say this is like 75% maybe 50 to 75% of the value of slow, right? Except it's one target instead of 6, and you can't even try to use this until they're bloodied. Okay. Um, so this is, at first it seems cool, and then you start thinking through it, and this is your level 18 capstone, right? So you're like, yeah, I have this cool control ability, and you've got a bard and a wizard in your party, or a sorcerer or a druid, right? You probably have one or two of those 4 classes, which are the great, the really strong control classes. And they're like, congrats, I was doing that at level 5, right? And I can do it on more targets, you know. And by the way, that isn't even one of my strong control spells, so I don't even cast that anymore. There's a lot of feel bad going on there. To make this even worse, you only get to use it. You can use it as many times as you want, but once they fail the saving throw, you can't use it again. All right, so this is going to have the same problem as their level 7 feature, which was you're going to resource hoard this because I got to use this on the biggest baddest guy. So you're going to save this for the BBEG or whatever you hope or think the biggest toughest fight's going to be for the day. And you're going to hold on to it, hold on to it, and hold on to it. And then what if this adventuring day you don't have that big fight? Then you just didn't use this at all because you were saving it for a moment that wasn't going to come. Uh, the whole design of this is not good. I think that they should take the bloodied requirement off so you can just start using it, right? Instead of halfway through the fight. In fact, a lot of the times creatures have a lot of defenses that you have to get through before you start doing a lot of damage, legendary resistances and different, shield spells, things like that they're blocking attacks. By the time you've started, piercing that and doing damage, getting them down to half hit points is like the fight is 2/3 of the way over or 75% of the way over, right? It's pretty late. And now I'm going to mutilate. Well, how many rounds of combat are left? 1 or 2? So you saved this and then you didn't get to use it until the fight was almost over. Um, yeah. And again, now this one has its own resource pool. So now the Gladiator subclass has 3 resource pools, 3 separate resource pools that you're managing on top of the fighter's base class. They've got Second Wind, they've got Action Surge, and they've got Indomitable, right? They've got 3 resource pools as a base class. You got 3 more resource pools as a subclass. And it's not even like really powerful to justify that, I guess. If you're like, this is the best subclass ever, I don't know, maybe it's worth that level of complexity. I don't think complexity is ever worth that though. That like it is hard enough to remember when you get to high levels, all the abilities you have going on. You've got magic items that have their own charges and special use case things. You've got spells, their effects that are going on. You've got features with their own effects that you have to remember. It is hard enough to remember all of those features on top of everything else going on. And then you add this unnecessary level of complexity. This is not a good design. I would again go back to either move that level 15 ability for all the recharging on brutality uses to level 3, or double your charisma modifier in brutality uses and make this one use brutality uses and just have it expend 3 brutality uses and only expend them if you succeed. If you try and they make their saving throw, you expend no brutality uses. I would do that. That way it encourages them to try and maybe use it a little more often, because now maybe you have 10 uses and this is only going to be 3 of them. You're not going to burn, it's not one shot for the whole day. So you're maybe going to try it a few more times, but you also know that you're not going to waste them, right? I might as well try. This is the biggest, this is fight number 1 of the day, but I'm going to go after the biggest guy here, which makes sense for a gladiator, right? On every fight, they're going after the biggest guy because you're the gladiator. You go after the biggest guy and you start using this on them to try to lock them down and keep them from the other party members, but you're also kind of tanking them by you're reducing their ability to damage you. So you're tanking them pretty well using this feature, and you can keep trying with confidence, knowing that you're not going to waste a bunch of your uses of brutality until they fail their saving throw. If they fail the saving throw, that's what you wanted anyway, right? And you're going to get a short rest maybe before the end of the day, so you can recharge a bunch, right? That's what I would do. And frankly, also, I think it's unnecessarily complex. They took out pieces of the slow spell effect and reprinted just parts of them. I would just say that I think a lot of people don't like this. What I would do is I would just say This causes the slow effect. The same effect as the slow spell. They suffer the effect of the slow spell. Not that you cast slow on them. Just say they suffer the effects of the slow spell. So that way, everybody who reads that just knows immediately, oh, I'm familiar with their slow spell. I know what it does. And this does the exact same thing. Reduces overhead for all of us who have to remember all these things. Reduces overhead for DMs and players. Let's keep it simpler. And to wrap this up, yeah, cool idea. I love the flavor. I love the theme. I love the idea of working on those masteries. It needs some more work. It's underpowered. It's overly complex. If I were to rank this against the other fighter subclasses, I would say at level 3, it's maybe slightly ahead of the champion fighter, right? Like Eldritch Knight and Battlemaster are number 1 somewhere in there. One of those is number 1, one of those number 2. Depends on how much you like spellcasting. This would be rank 3. This would be the third one, and then champion. But at later levels, I think champion beats this. I think this is the worst subclass in like tiers of the fighter in tier 3 and 4. Yep, that's where I would put it. So needs some more cooking on this one, and I hope they do because I love Dark Sun and I love the Gladiator theme and concept. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.